Cuba's urgent economic shift. Real reform or familiar rhetoric? When crisis forces the conversation, there are moments when governments choose reform. And then there are moments when reform chooses them. This week, Cuba's president, Miguel Díaz-Canel, called for immediate and urgent transformations to the island's economic and social model. The message came during a Council of Ministers meeting in Havana, and the timing is impossible to ignore. Cuba is not just facing a routine slowdown. It's confronting dwindling oil reserves, halted shipments from Venezuela following U.S. military action earlier this year, and tightening sanctions from the U.S. Treasury Department. Add severe power outages, fuel rationing, suspended public transport, and online schooling due to shortages, and you don't just have economic strain. You have structural vulnerability exposed at when the president speaks of urgent transformations. The real question becomes, why now? And will this be different? The promise of autonomy, but how much? Díaz-Canel's proposal focuses on municipal autonomy, business reforms, resizing the state apparatus, and encouraging partnerships between state and non-state sectors. On paper, that sounds like decentralization, maybe even modernization. But here's the tension. Can autonomy truly flourish inside a tightly centralized political and economic system? Cuba has historically operated under a heavily state-controlled model. Now, municipalities are being told to manage foreign direct investment, build partnerships, and even engage with Cubans living abroad. That's a significant shift in rhetoric. Yet rhetoric and structural reform are not the same thing. That if local governments are granted responsibility without genuine financial freedom or decision-making power, does that create innovation? Or simply shift blame downward when shortages persist? The distinction matters. Energy crisis, the catalyst or the excuse? At the heart of this urgency is energy. Prime Minister Manuel Moreno Cruz has emphasized food production and overhauling the power grid as top priorities. Meanwhile, Energy Minister Vicente de la Olivia acknowledged that progress on local transition strategies has been slow, even with solar panels distributed to doctors, teachers, and children. Solar panels are symbolic. They signal a move toward resilience. But symbolism doesn't power factories. It doesn't stabilize industry. It doesn't fix a grid that's been deteriorating for decades. And here's the harder question. Is Cuba building a long-term energy transformation plan, or scrambling for survival in the face of oil shortages? Because those are two very different strategies. Sanctions, pressure, or shield? Cuba's government reports nearly $8 billion in lost revenue due to increased U.S. sanctions between March 2024 and February 2025, a 50% rise compared to the previous period. Sanctions undeniably squeeze the island's economy. But there's a deeper debate that rarely gets addressed openly. To what extent are sanctions the sole driver of economic stagnation? And to what extent do internal inefficiencies play a role? External pressure is real. Yet so are structural rigidities, limited market incentives, and state-heavy bureaucracy. If reforms focus only on surviving sanctions without rethinking foundational economic controls, can genuine growth emerge? It's easier to rally citizens around foreign pressure. It's harder to confront domestic policy failures. The municipal gamble, perhaps the most interesting and risky. Part of the president's message is the push for municipalities to rely on their own resources. That sounds empowering, but let's pause. If local governments are already dealing with power outages, transportation halts, and limited fuel supplies, what exactly are these own resources? If wealthier municipalities attract investment while poorer regions struggle, does decentralization widen inequality within the island? And politically, how much autonomy is truly acceptable before it challenges centralized authority? Reforming controlled systems always walks a tightrope. Crisis-driven reform. Sustainable or temporary? History shows that many governments promise reform during crisis, only to recalibrate once immediate pressure eases. Recently, the U.S. Treasury slightly eased restrictions on Venezuelan oil sales to Cuba. That small opening could reduce short-term strain. But it also raises a critical question. If oil flows improve again, will the urgency fade? Will structural transformation continue when survival becomes slightly easier? Sustainable reform requires long-term commitment, not just emergency response. The bigger picture, economic evolution or system preservation? At its core, this announcement reveals something profound, that Cuba's leadership recognizes that the existing model is struggling to withstand modern geopolitical shocks. Dwindling oil, sanctions pressure, food insecurity, and power instability are not isolated problems. They are interconnected symptoms. Yet the language remains cautious, resizing the state, not reducing it. Partnerships, not privatization. Autonomy, but within defined limits. The core system remains intact. And that's where the skepticism naturally arises. Is this moment the beginning of a genuine economic evolution? Or is it an attempt to adjust the machine without redesigning it? A crossroads moment. Cuba stand at a crossroads point. One path leads to incremental reforms that relieve pressure but maintain the central framework. The other path requires deeper structural openness, something far more politically complex. Urgency is clear. The crisis is visible. The rhetoric is stronger than before. But transformation is not measured in speeches, that it's measured in sustained policy shifts, institutional flexibility, and real economic outcomes. The world will be watching, but more importantly, so will the Cuban people. And for them, urgent isn't just a political word, it's daily life.